We're here right now with Mitch Glaser next to me here and Joe Blodgett joining us from up in the Bay Area to talk about the show that they wrote for the Hollywood Fringe Festival as part of New Musical Inc.'s project that was called 1001 Minutes of New Musicals. Mitch wrote the book and lyrics, and Joe wrote the music for the show Thanksgiving in Ithaca that was part of our production C. And so we want to talk to them about that whole process and how that came about. So Mitch and Joe, why don't you talk to us to begin with about how you decided to work together as a team back last September or August when we got started on this, and how you came to the idea of doing a sort of a modern adaptation of the story of Odysseus and his return home.
Well, to start with, I guess Joe's name was on the list of people who had been invited to participate. So when I was presented with the list, I felt like, oh, I'd love to do something with Joe, because we wrote a song in core probably 10 years ago or something, but it was fun. And of course, I saw the Max Factor, and I liked that a lot. So for me, it was, that's the one I want to work with, my first choice.
Great. And so you contacted Joe and decided you'd work together? Yeah?
That's right.
I also remember fondly working with Mitch in that project for the core curriculum. And so all these years later, it was exciting to have the opportunity to work on something a little bigger, a little meatier. And the story idea came to us, just from exploring public domain stories that are available to adapt, and we had talked about the possibility of writing something through sung, a short opera essentially, and this story seemed pretty well suited to that. It's high stakes and high drama, and it seemed like a good fit for that desire to write a short opera.
Actually, I pitched a couple of original ideas that we didn't immediately take to, and I said, well, do you have anything you'd like to do? And he says, well, I've always been fond of the Odyssey. And I said, well, we've got 15 minutes. Any part of that you particularly like? So I was relieved that we ended up with the ending of it, the last part.
Odysseus' return to Penelope and the suitors, so to speak, or your version of that. And what besides the fact that it was public domain and that it was an interesting topic to you, was there anything about it thematically, or what were you trying to say with it that you thought you could bring to the piece as you musicalized it?
Well, immediately the thought of killing off a lot of people at the end was appealing to me. It's my sensibilities. At that point, we had already, because of some of the things that I had pitched sort of unsuccessfully, we were already thinking of something that might have a Greek chorus kind of thing, which we did not end up doing, but it got us in the mood. So,
Yeah. Well, and so let's talk a little bit about the process that you went through, because the way we had worked it at NMI is that you came into the monthly workshops in September, October, November, and brought in some of your material, got feedback. How was that for you in terms of developing the show, and what feedback you got from the staff and from your peers?
Well, once we threw some ideas back and forth over the phone, I got busy writing something like an outline and brought that in, and there was quite a lot of fruitful discussion. Probably, I feel like I may have let that part of it go on a little too long, and it ended up eating into a little bit of our creative time, and we ended up being a little rushed. But
I don't think you were alone in that. But
no, but nonetheless, it was very useful, and the biggest bone of contention did indeed completely disappear from the plot before the end. So
yes, interestingly, because you were finding that it was running a little long, you needed to trim, and you realized that the section that was causing problems could just sort of go away and simplify that, and at the same time as shortening the show.
That's right. It worked without it, and away it went. And if we ever do a longer version, I'm not sure it's coming back.
Because you realized you didn't need it. It was an unnecessary complication. It was just sort of detailing the rationale behind the return of Odysseus, and legally. It was all about legal stuff.
About his will.
Yes,
And we
exactly.
just dropped it.
Right. And I'd love to talk about one of the other things that I think you guys were working on right from the beginning, and that maybe the feedback either helped you or pushed you or helped you refine it, was the fact that you were dealing in two different tones. You wanted the piece to be relatively serious and dramatic, but comic at the same time, or sort of a push-pull. So when did that idea come to you, and how did the development process help you figure out how to make that work?
Well, go ahead.
Joe.
Right from the start, we wanted it to be both of those things. The story is inherently very dramatic and has so many serious elements. But if the entire 15 minutes was like that, it would be very heavy. And there are also so many moments that we felt like we could really have fun with. As Mitch mentioned, the opportunity to kill off all these family members was really kind of delightful. And we, rather than making that serious and depressing, we thought it would be more entertaining to have that be a funny moment. And so the story really called for both of those things.
Great.
Well, and as soon as we, very early on, if not absolutely immediately, the idea was to move it from ancient Ithaca to modern Ithaca, New York. And I don't think that could be played for anything but laughs. You might try find some serious reason to have done that, but it's never really our intention. So it was going to be funny, and also instead of being suitors, we substituted, nagging, greedy family members, and placed it at Thanksgiving, because it would be one of those uncomfortable family gatherings instead of whatever happened in the Odyssey. So,
Right.
yeah, we were playing it for laughs. But the instant I started actually writing the show, the first words that were coming into my head were immediately that opening number, which is probably the most serious moment. Straight
Odysseus's first number when he comes home to Ithaca for the first time and is sort of happy that he's made it home. And it's a dramatic aria that doesn't have a laugh in it until the very end, when he pulls out his mask, and so he can disguise himself, and pulls out a fake beard. That's the first hint the audience has that they're not quite where they thought they were.
That's right. And then it's immediately followed by kind of almost a music hall sort of number, which is
With
very
the family.
funny. Yeah.
Right. So let's talk now a little bit about the process. Once you had completed the show and it was ready to go into rehearsal, and it was cast and it went into rehearsals, Mitch, you were able to attend most of the rehearsals in person, and Joe, you were often there through video conference, but you were in the rehearsals as well. What was that process like, seeing it come to life, seeing the actors get to interpret your roles, and dealing with a problematic director?
I think it's all very educational. We have a good sense of what we're trying to do, but it's not until you see actors interpreting that you understand what you've really written. So we learned a lot about, was our intention coming across? Did we need to try to explain it better, or did we need to actually rewrite moments if they weren't coming across? But there's also just such joy in that moment of hearing the music sung out loud, and seeing actors, well, not reading lines because it was all sung, but seeing it on its feet with actors making their choices and giving life to those characters.
Yeah, a lot of fun. And then when it got in front of an audience, how did that feel?
Well, it's just a joygasm, basically, to actually to see the thing take place. And, it turned out to be a fairly complex piece, and a lot of people on the stage. There were eight characters. So during the rehearsals, it took quite a while for it to really gel. And so just the last week or so, or maybe the last 2 weeks, was when the actors were really starting to inject nuance into it. And that was just lovely.
Oh yeah, I think their characters grew and grew by leaps and bounds in the last several days once they got comfortable with because having to learn the material in a short period of time, it took them a while to get comfortable. But boy, when they got comfortable, they really started to enjoy it.
Plus, they were never on the stage all at the same time. They never could make it all to the rehearsals at the same time until the last week or something. So that's when it really started to click. And it's just, well, the rehearsals are the best part because they're not nerve-wracking like the shows are.
Oh, you found them nerve-wracking, watching the show? Because you're worried about the audience response?
Yeah, you invite people and you wonder if all the actors are going to show up, and
Now about that, you did have an issue where, and this is not an atypical issue in the Fringe Festival, that one of your actors in one of your 5 performances, it was the 4th performance, wasn't it?
Yes.
And he got the times mixed up and didn't make it on time. And we actually had to hand over the script to the stage manager and have her go on and do the role. Now, I knew when I asked her to do it, I'd seen her in rehearsal doing various things for the different shows that she was stage managing, and I knew she was a ham at heart, and I knew she would do a good job, which I think she did. Now, I know it's not the same thing as having the actor, but I think the audience really enjoyed it and embraced it.
I couldn't understand why you didn't ask me to do it. I was sitting right there. Anyway, the audience loved it, and that was great. But it was a moment for me. That show passed by in the blink of an eye because I was just somewhere else mentally. But the audience really appreciated it, and it was funny. And the actors were kind of herding her around on the stage so that somebody wouldn't have to spend the next scene talking to an empty spot, and that made it funny actually. So.
So the audience, you feel of getting a peek behind the scenes a little bit when something like that happens,
in a way,
in Fringe,
right?
Where everything quickly put together. It can be even if it's a mistake, in some ways it can feel like a little bit like a treat.
Yes.
It was like the third act of Gypsy.
Intended, but it okay.
So tell me, do you guys have any thoughts about a future for this particular show? Are you thinking of doing anything else with it?
Well, we haven't discussed it since the performances, but it was clear beforehand that we could have done a half an hour or 45 minutes. It doesn't maybe seem quite a bit of enough material for a full-length show, but then we have the other 95% of the Odyssey to dip into if we really wanted.
This could be Act 2 of our full-length show.
There you go. But have you thought about things like 10 or 15-minute play and musical festivals to submit it as it stands?
It's crossed my mind. We haven't discussed it. It's asking a lot to get somebody to find 8 people and rehearse them for it. It's not going to be an easy piece to do, but I have the inflatable turkey.
That's true.
And
That's true.
would go along free with you buy a copy of the libretto and
you get an inflatable turkey. Yeah, that's a great perk. And what about as collaborators, you two, after having gone through this experience, are you talking or thinking about what your next project might be together?
We haven't yet, but I was entirely satisfied with the process, and I love the music, and we both, we had to rush enough at the end so that it would have been great if we could rehearse and then have made changes. But as soon as it went into rehearsals, it was finalized essentially, except for small things. And so I'm sure we would both like to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I agree. Throughout this process, certainly the last stages of writing and the rehearsal process, I found it hard to think much beyond opening night. But certainly it was a fun process. I'd love to work on the show a little more. Maybe work on another show.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity then to encourage you to, to do a bit of a blatant commercial for NMI and talk about what it was like to be part of the entire process from beginning to end, shepherded by NMI, and how you would feel about doing such a thing again.
I feel quite good about the idea of doing such a thing again. I wanted to do something in the Fringe Festival for the last few years, and doing it through NMI just kind of dropped into my lap and made it possible. I don't know that I ever actually would have gotten off my butt and done it otherwise. So I credit or blame NMI for the entire experience. I enjoyed it, and it made it, the problem is hiring the actors and doing all the productions and all those sorts of things, and I didn't have to do any of those things. So
You did have to get some of the props, like the inflatable turkey.
that was fun, and the double magnum of Italian wine, but
Which you had to empty.
yes, it is still being used to baste various things in my kitchen to this day. But that's the fun part. Buying that was great, and I bought a costume for Athena on Amazon. That was all fun.
How about you, Joe?
I think it was a great experience. I've been involved with NMI for 8 or 9 years now, and written a few shows, and it's always been fun, and certainly the feedback from the staff is always very insightful and helpful in realizing our vision. But as Mitch was saying, especially with this process, the Fringe Festival, having the support around all the production, getting the space, finding the actors, all of that really made it possible in a way that I don't know if that we could have pulled it off just on our own. It made it doable, and it made it really a lot of fun. And it's definitely something I would love to do again at some point.
We're glad to hear that. It definitely was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun for me as the director. I enjoyed getting to work on that show. So thank you guys very much for that. To wrap up, I want to ask you a more sort of general question. Each of you maybe can contribute a little bit about what do you think in general might be the sort of future for musical theater, and if you had the opportunity to give advice to writers who were trying to write the musicals of tomorrow, what would you tell them you think they should be doing? Joe, do you want to start?
Yes,
Okay, the
please.
future of musical theater. Yeah, I've got that. I know exactly what it's going to be. No, I don't. But it's exciting to see musical forms and styles continue to evolve. I think what you really need to do to be successful at it is find something that you really love, a story and musical style and all of that you really love, a group of collaborators that you really love working with, because it's a long process, and you have to, even just to write one show can take years, and so you have to really want to keep doing it. But it's so rewarding when you do find those things.
That's great. How about you? How about you, Mitch?
Well, I think the future is in keeping with modern musical tastes. That seems what people really want to see. And you can still write things that are completely old school. Our piece was fairly old school. There's a smaller audience for it. I think there's a bigger audience for Hamilton, and I only just recently saw a Book of Mormon finally for the first time, and it's nothing if not current, and so I think the future is to stick with what the musical trends that people are interested in, which is hard for me because I don't write rap, but I'm going to have to try, clearly.
Or find your own voice in that arena somehow.
I'm sure it's there somewhere.
Well, here's a fantasy question for each of you as a final moment. Imagine, if you will, that you wake up tomorrow morning and someone has left a gift of $100 million to you that you can devote to the development of new musicals. How would you spend that money?
Well, I would love to own a little theater complex like Sacred Fools, that where we had our performances, and have a big-ish theater and a smallish theater and nurture stuff, and of course they would have to do my stuff, so that's just a given. If I wasn't too busy to write anymore, that's very appealing to me. Also, the work that I do with a little new music cabaret. It's great reaching out to people, encouraging them to send you their new stuff and whatever. So I would do that. I would feel obligated to do that if I had the money.
How about you, Joe? You'd get yourself a helicopter so you could come down to LA more often, right?
Yes, so let's start by the helicopter. I would give a big chunk of it to NMI, because NMI does such great reporting, all this new work, and all these artists who are making it happen. I think finding people who are passionate about it and encouraging them and investing in these kinds of programs that support that work, that take the burdens of production costs and production work off of them so that they can just focus on the writing and making the show the best it can be without having to get caught up in the weeds of renting a theater and marketing and all that stuff. I think that would go a long way towards supporting theater writers.
Great. Well, I certainly hope each one of you gets your $100 million and can realize your dreams. That would be fantastic. And I want to thank you so much for writing Thanksgiving in Ithaca and being a part of the Fringe project, and say thank you and so long.
Thank you. Thank you for directing it.
You're welcome.